there are questions that CXC usually asks. So I am encouraging you to read the book. I know that it's not reader friendly, especially for students, black and white, no colored, but please try and answer the question because you will get a Haitian Rev on the exam. Those very same questions might come up on an exam. All right. And for each of them, please steal.
Sir, could you repeat?
I said for each of the questions that I gave to you yesterday to do, peel each of them. Do it in your notebooks. It's not something you have to submit to me, but if you want to pass, you need to do it because you're going. Go ahead.
So the first question, it said, how did the French govern the colony of Saint Domingue? Sir, are you referring to us as I'm saying about politically or economically?
It would be politically.
Okay, sir.
Politically, how the French governed Saint Domingue. So if you look at the page, the answer is within pages. Let's have a look. The first page is habit. I believe it is page 1 to 7. The first few pages in the textbook answer that question. Each of the questions can be answered. The answers are in the book, so you have to read it.
Yes, sir.
All right. Give me a second, please. All right, ladies. So for today's class, we're going to continue to look at the Haitian Revolution. And we would have, last week would have looked at Haiti, look at an introduction of Haiti and the island of Hispaniola, the history of the island of Hispaniola. And so we know for sure that the French would have captured the western side of the island from the Spanish, and they renamed the western part of the island, which is this part of the island, Saint Domingue. Now, once the French took over uh, the western part of the island, and they call it Saint Domingue, they're going to establish plantations, right? So, for example, Haiti will be, or Saint Domingue will be the wealthiest colony in the entire Western Hemisphere. In fact, it was called the Pearl of the Antilles. Yes, it was wealthier than all the British colonies combined, wealthier than Jamaica, wealthier than the Cayman Islands, wealthier than Barbados, St. Kitts, all those territories combined. Saint Domingue was a very, very wealthy colony. It was called the Pearl of the Antilles. In fact, how do we know that it was? Because if you're going to the exam and they said that Saint Domingue was referred to as the Pearl of the Antilles. To what extent do you agree with this? You need to support it with evidence. You need to support it that Saint Domingue was a very wealthy colony. So one, it produced more sugar than all the British Caribbean colonies combined. So if you put all the British colonies together, the amount of sugar that they produce, Saint Domingue produced way more than all of them combined. In fact, in 1754, Saint Domingue had over 600 sugar plantations. By 1788, it had over 800 sugar plantations. In 1767, Saint Domingue would have exported 72 million pounds of raw sugar, right? And C.L.R. James, which is an historian, he said that they would have produced 51 million pounds of white sugar. So long before the British colonies start to crystallize sugar, Haiti, or Saint Domingue, the colony was called under French rule, they were actually producing white sugar. Not only that they had sugar, but they also had coffee. They also produced cocoa. So from 1755, the production of coffee moved from 7 million to 68 million tons. So you can see that the colony is producing quite a lot of goods. So they produce sugar, coffee, cocoa, yes, logwood, mahogany, anything at all, yes, anything you can think about. Saint Domingue was producing that. And so it was a very wealthy colony. It made the France proud that they owned Saint Domingue. Let us now look at this production. Now, this production in Saint Domingue, it is the enslaved people who are working on the plantations. And because they are producing and they are expanding when it comes to plantation, whether it is a sugar plantation, a coffee plantation, a cocoa plantation, right? They are going to need more African laborers. So in Saint Domingue, they had in 1681, they had 2,000 Africans. And these are not Africans who were actually born in the Caribbean, but Africans that came directly from Africa, right? So Sandama, 2000, and by 1791, because the revolution, the Haitian Revolution started in 1791. At the time of the Haitian Revolution, they had 480,000 enslaved Africans. And we are talking about enslaved Africans, right? Who majority of these enslaved Africans are going to come directly from Africa. Now, we want to look at the causes of the Haitian Revolution. What led to the Haitian? What led these enslaved people, the 480,000 people in Saint-Domingue, to revolt? And in fact, they are called the revolutionaries. Yes, they are called revolutionaries because they are revolting against the system of slavery. Now, if you have a colony that has 480,000 Africans, right? And majority of the Africans are from directly from Africa. What do you think? What is the link to rebellion? What is going to be the link between having uh, so many African born enslaved people?
Mr. Because in Africa they were free, so they're used to being free people.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So they will go. So what they are going to do?
So they're going to plot ways to revolt.
Revolt. Very good. Because yeah, they were free people in Africa. Very good. And so they are going to plot their rebellion. Now, in Saint-Domingue, you're going to have several different social groups, right? So you had at the top of the social ladder the Grand Blancs. Then you had the Petit Blancs, and this made up 20,000 of the population. So you had the Grand Blancs and the Petit Blancs, 20,000 of the population. And then you had the mulattoes or the colored who made up 30,000. And then the enslaved Africans that made up, well, this pyramid said 452,000, but the figures is between 452,000 to 480,000. So some textbook will say 452, some will say 480 or between that, right? And so this was a social pyramid. The Grand Blancs was at the top, the Petit Blancs was at the below the Grand Blancs. These were the whites. Then you had the colored, and below the colored, you had the enslaved people. That was a social group. And so if you look at the social group, majority of the social group right here, a majority of the largest social group is the enslaved people. Now, what are some of the causes of the Haitian Revolution? So I'm going to let you know this just, we're going to go through each of these causes, right? So one, the impact of the French Revolution on Saint-Domingue. So the French Revolution is going to cause a revolution in the colony of Saint-Domingue. So we're going to look at how the Haitian Revolution impacted Sondermark. Another cause is the desire for freedom. So the enslaved people had a desire for freedom. Another one, as we can look at the social pyramid here, was that Africans had a numerical superiority. Not only that they had a numerical superiority, but majority of them were African born. They were not Creole. Most of them were African born. Another reason for the Haitian Revolution was the harsh treatments that the enslaved people went through. Therefore, they wanted to be free from those harsh treatments. And then we have to look at the role of their religion. And we have to also look at the leadership that is taking place in Sondermark. Who were the leaders? Which enslaved persons actually tried to organize the entire enslaved population to fight against the French? And so these are some of the causes that we're going to look at. So the first one, let us look at the impact of the French Revolution. So in France, in 1789, remember that the Haitian Revolution started in which year? Haitian Rev started in which year?
1791.
Very good, 1791. Now, before 1791, in 1789 in France, a revolution started there. The French Revolution started in France in 1789. Now, we might ask ourselves the question, what is the link between a revolution taking place in France between white people and a revolution taking place in Haiti or Sondermark? Now, in 1789 in France, a group of people there, the middle class, they are going to declare themselves to have certain ideals. And so you're going to have the Declaration of the Rights of Men and Citizens. Because in fact, what was taking place here, most people in France, they did not like how the king was actually governing France during this period. So the king of France was living very wealthy. The queen, his wife, also lived lavishly, while the other people in the society could not even buy bread, to eat. And so in France, what was taking place in France at this time is that a lot of people in France, they were against the monarchy. They were against the monarchy. They were also against the church, the Roman Catholic Church. They felt like the church supported the king and the king supported the church. And they also felt like the king or the monarchy was not helping them, or the monarchy did not care about their concern, that they were struggling. Some of them could not buy bread. In fact, the queen, the king's wife, when the people said that they wanted bread, she told them to go and make cake. If you're hungry And you go to somebody and you say you need, you're really, really hungry. And you go to somebody and tell them that you want bread. Beg a piece of bread, and they said you need to go and bake cake. How would you feel? How would you feel? Question. How would you feel, ladies?
So I would feel disrespected and
Yes,
uncared for.
very yes. And not only that, the Queen of France, uh, she wore a lot of jewelries and she flaunted her jewelries all over the place, and people can't eat bread. And so, and not only that, people in France, they didn't have any rights. And so the people in France at this time, they declared that, listen, we are going to fight against the monarchy. We're going to put an end to the monarchy. We are going to put an end to the monarchy. And so they declared the rights of men and citizens. And these were some of the rights that they're going to say. Liberty, that everybody in France should have liberty, fraternity or brotherhood, and equality. Everybody, you shouldn't have any king. Let us get rid of the monarchy. Let us establish France as a republic with a leader who is not a king. Let us get rid of the monarchy completely. In fact, they even wanted to get rid of the church. And so that was what was going on in France in 1789. Liberty, people are talking about liberty, freedom. People need, every single citizen in France wanted their rights to vote, to make their own political decisions. They need to be equal, so everybody is, or if one person, if the leader can eating rice and peas, I'm just giving you an example, and everybody should eat rice and peas. Equality. If the people can only afford bread, then the leader should only eat bread. And so that big revolt happened in France during this time, and they got rid of the king. All right? Let us read. I want somebody to read this for me, please. Start from here. Someone please read it for me.
Article 1. Men are born and remain free and equal in rights. Social distinctions may only be founded upon the general good. The aim of all political association is the preservation of the natural and imprescriptible rights of man. These rights are liberty, poverty, and security, and resistance to oppression.
Good. Thank you very much. So the people in France, they felt like they were being oppressed by the monarchy. And so they got rid of the monarchy. Right? And so if a revolution is taking place in France, then we are expecting that it is going to people in the colonies like Haiti, where Saint-Domingue, the colony was called, in Saint-Domingue, in Martinique, in Guadeloupe, in Louisiana. They too going to discuss what is going on in France, because big things going on there where they got rid of the king. Yes. And so in Saint-Domingue, the Grand Blancs, which were the very wealthy blacks, sorry, the very wealthy whites, they said that they wanted freedom from France. because they said that if everyone has the right to govern themselves or to choose their own government, then they, the Grand Blancs, wanted freedom from France. Why they wanted freedom? Because France was dictating to the colony Saint-Domingue how to trade, who to trade with, when to trade, how to trade. And they really wanted to trade freely without France interfering in the colony of Saint-Domingue. So the Grand Blanc said, listen, we want freedom from France. Just like how you want freedom from people in France want freedom from the monarchy, whoever is leading France, whether it is a king, whether it is a queen, whether it is Napoleon, whether it's a president, whoever is leading France, whether it is a national assembly, whoever is leading France, we want to be free from France. We need to be independent in Saint-Domingue. These are French whites living in Saint-Domingue, the Grand Blancs, the very wealthy ones. They wanted to govern themselves independently from France. So that is the first problem now. So you see that you're applying the same revolutionary ideas about liberty, fraternity, and equality. These are also called Enlightenment Ideals. So the first thing, the Grand Blanc said, listen, we want to be free from France because everybody else, you want freedom from the monarchy. We don't like how you govern us because the monarchy is telling us how to, we live in Saint-Domingue. We live in Saint-Domingue. And you are so far away and you want to tell us how to live in Saint-Domingue, how to govern ourselves in Saint-Domingue, and you want to restrict trade. Now, the France would have had a very serious policy on Saint-Domingue, which was called the exclusive, meaning that planters could only trade with France. They could not trade with other territories. And because of that, the Grand Blancs did not like that rule from France. So they said, listen, we need to govern ourselves. Then not only that, we know that social is not only the Grand Blancs is a social group, but the Petit Blancs, which was the poor whites, they said to themselves that, listen, the Grand Blancs want freedom from France. They want to govern themselves. But we, the Petit Blancs, we want voting rights. Right? They said that they want voting rights in France. Not in France, in Saint-Domingue. They want voting rights. Because if we're saying that where it is, if we're saying here that men are born free and remain free and equal in rights, then if the Grand Blancs control the Haitian colonial government and they can vote and they can be elected, then the Petit Blancs also want freedom. They want some freedom too. They want voting rights. They want to sit in the colonial government to help govern. They want the same rights that the Grand Blancs have. You're following, ladies?
Yes, sir.
Good. So the Grand Blancs, they want freedom from France. They want to govern themselves. The Petit Blanc said, oh yes, I agree with the blanks that we should get freedom from France, that we in Saint-Domingue need to govern ourselves. But if we are going to govern ourselves, we need voting rights. We need to can elect persons or nominate people to be elected to the government in Saint-Domingue. It cannot be that it's only the Grand Blancs alone wants freedom. And then the colored, most of them were very wealthy because most of their fathers were planters or Grand Blancs, right? And they said, we need also certain rights. The same rights that the whites have, the Grand and the Petit Blancs, we also want that right. In fact, they did not allow the colored to wear certain clothing. They could not wear jewelry. So even if a colored had a Grand Blanc father and that father left a lot of jewelry and clothing for them, they could not wear clothing like silk, and they could not drink tea with the whites, or they are not allowed to go to certain party. They could not vote. And so the colored are saying, in France, everybody is talking about liberty, freedom. And if everybody is talking about liberty and freedom and equality, well, liberty and equality, then we also want equality with the whites. We also want freedom. What the enslaved people is going to say. Every social group declaring something. They want something. Grand Blancs, what the Grand Blancs wanted? What did the Grand Blancs want?
Freedom
Want to
from
freedom
France.
from France.
Good. The Petit Blancs, what they want?
Voting rights.
Voting rights.
What the colored wants?
The same rights as the whites.
And now if everybody up here declaring that they want some form of freedom and liberty, well, liberty and equality, what do you think the enslaved people are going to say? What they want?
Freedom.
Yes, that's right, Joanna. The enslaved people is going to say, all of you having discussion about who want liberty from France and who want liberty to vote, freedom to vote, and who want equality and freedom to have the same rights as the whites. All we want is our freedom. You need to give us our freedom. So we can see the impact of the French Revolution on each social group, because the French Revolution gave us three ideas or three ideals, three concepts. What are those three concepts that the French Revolution gave to us?
Liberty, fraternity, and equality.
Good. And so each of the different groups in Saint-Domingue, social groups in Saint-Domingue, they are going to apply those Enlightenment ideas to themselves. They are going to take it for themselves. They are going to say that the enslaved people say they want their freedom. The colored say they want their freedom and rights as the whites. The Petit Blancs say they want the same rights as the Grand Blancs. And the Grand Blancs say they want freedom from France. Big problem in France. In Saint-Domingue, I should say. Sorry. Serious problem. So the enslaved people said that they wanted their freedom. And so, if we look at the planters or the Grand Blancs, most of them were actually wealthy planters. They did not like how France ruled or governed Saint-Domingue. They had no representation in France. So France is making the rules and they don't have anybody to sit in the National Assembly in France. And they were in support of slavery. They supported slavery. The Petit Blancs on the other side, most of them were artisans, skilled workers, shopkeepers, merchant, teachers. They were less independent minded, but they were more loyal to France. But at the same time, they still supported the Grand Blancs' decision for independence. And they too approved slavery. So both the Grand Blancs and the Petit Blancs, they supported slavery. Now, impact of the French Revolution and Saint-Domingue. One, you have to look at the revolutionary or Enlightenment ideas or how these ideas were applied to each group. Now, once you have the Petit Blancs demanding certain rights and the Grand Blancs want certain rights, the Grand Blancs is going to say to the Petit Blancs that, listen, you're not a planter. You should not have right to vote. Problem. The colored is going to, the whites, both the Petit and the Grand Blancs going to say to the colored, no, you're not supposed to have any rights or privilege, the same privilege as the whites. And they're also going to say to the enslaved people that you should remain as enslaved. So what we find in Saint-Domingue in terms of the impact of the French Revolution is that it is going to deepen the division in the society. So the Grand Blancs turn against the Petit Blancs turn against the Grand Blancs. The Petit Blancs and the Grand Blancs turn against the colored. The colored turn against the Grand Blancs and the Petit Blancs. The colored turn against the enslaved Africans. The whites, the Grand Blancs, and the Petit Blancs turn against it. So the society was very fragmented. Very, very fragmented society during this period. All right? Now, another cause. So we look at how the French Revolution going to cause problem in Saint-Domingue, where people is going to divide against themselves, each social group. My question to you is, every social group is, especially the whites, if the whites are divided among themselves, what do you think? Are they fighting against each other, both the Grand Blancs and the Petit Blancs in Saint-Domingue? What opportunity is that giving the enslaved people?
Sir, time to plot revolts.
Yes. And so when you're discussing or answering a question like this, you must link it back to that, a cause. So while all the different groups were fighting against each other, the Petit Blancs and the Grand Blancs and the colored against the Petit, it was allowing the enslaved people time to plot a rebellion or a revolt. And so that was very important. Another cause, so we have ticked the impact of the French Revolution on Saint-Domingue, and we have seen here how the French Revolution how the French Revolution led to another revolution in Saint-Domingue. Now, another reason for the French Revolution was that while everybody else talking about freedom, who want freedom from France and who want voting rights and who want the same rights as the whites, the enslaved people also desired their freedom. And so the enslaved people felt that with all the different ideologies going around about freedom, that it applied to them also. And they believed that the French slave laws or the Code Noir took away their freedom. And so they wanted their freedom. The French people, the enslaved people in Saint-Domingue said that freedom is the natural condition of man. Man was born free. And so they too should be free. We were free in Africa. We came to the Caribbean on ships, and so we should remain free people. So another cause was their desire for freedom, because they were enslaved by the Code Noir, the Black Code. Another reason why you're going to have a revolt taking place is because of Black numerical superiority. Blacks were numerical in numbers. They had more blacks in the society, and so that gave them the confidence to plan a rebellion. And then the best part about it is that it is easy to plan a rebellion when everybody up top, the upper classes in the society or the upper social groups, were against themselves. So the numerical superiority, when you look at 450 to 500,000 enslaved people compared to 20,000 whites, it gave them the numerical number. When I was going to primary school, the students used to say that two pan one a murder. You have ever heard that one before? When two children or two of the students at school turn on one child. Any of you ever heard that statement before?
No, sir.
Oh Lord. So they said 2 on 1 is murder. That's a Jamaican colloquial statement. So meaning if you have more than one people fighting against someone, you can basically say that they're going to kill them. So if we have 450,000 blacks compared to 20,000 whites, listen, judgment. And then the white group, they were segregated. Now, there were 2 types of enslaved people in Saint-Domingue. 2 types, right? 2 types of enslaved people in Saint-Domingue. You had the Creole slaves and the African-born slaves. The Creole slaves are those who were born in the Americas. Those who were born in Saint-Domingue, the Creole slave, and the African-born slave are those who came directly from West Africa. Now, majority of the enslaved population was African-born, and they were recently imported. And so they are coming from Africa with their military tradition, their guerrilla tactics. Somebody read what John Thornton has to say. Start from African soldiers here.
African soldiers in the Haitian Revolution. Import statistics assembled by historians of slavery in Saint-Domingue show this clearly. 60 to 70% of enslaved adults listed in the inventories of Saint-Domingue were born in Africa.
Good. So not only, so 60 to 70% were born in Africa. So they came in with militarized skills like guerrilla tactics to fight against the system of slavery. Now, the question I want to ask you, why were African-born slaves more likely to rebel than Creole slaves?
So because they were naturally freed in their country before,
Yes.
and Creole slaves would be likely to conform since they are born in the colony.
Very good, very good. Very good. Now, another reason for the Haitian Rev, so we look at the impact of the French Revolution on Saint-Domingue, the desire for freedom, Black numerical superiority, African-born enslaved, that majority of them were African-born. The next one is now the harsh treatments. And so even though they said that the Code Noir was way better than the other slave laws, the enslaved people in Saint-Domingue endured a lot. Yes, they endured a lot. And so it was terrible. Somebody, could you read this for me, please? Examples of horrible treatment. Someone, please.
For the least fault, the slaves received the harshest punishment. In 1685, the Negro Code authorized whipping, and in 1702, one colonist, a marquis, thought any punishment which demanded more than 100 blows of the whip was serious enough to be handed over to the authorities. Later, the number was fixed at 39, then raised to 50. But the colonists paid no attention to these regulations, and slaves were not unfrequently whipped to death. The slaves received the whip with more certainty and regularity than they received their food. Mutilations were common, limbs, ears, and sometimes the private parts. Their masters poured burning wax on their arms and hands and shoulders, emptied the boiling cane sugar over their heads, burned them alive, roasted them on slow fires, filled them with gunpowder, and blew them up with a match.
Thank you very much, Williams. These, C.L.R. James described some of the conditions. Sometimes they received no food. They were whipped. They pour wax on their hands. They put them on a stake. You know, like how them do is burger, that sausage, and you put the sausage around and the fire. The same way they do the enslaved people as forms of punishment. And so the harsh conditions of slavery, the treatment meted out to the enslaved people were very harsh. And so because of the harsh treatments, every 5 years the enslaved population had to be replenished because a lot of them died. As C.L.R. James said that mutilation were common. Mutilations, they take off the limb, the ears, the private parts, they cut it off. Most of them gonna die. And so the masters also poured wax, burning wax on their arms and hands. And some of them made them eat their own excrement and drink their own urine. Those were some of the punishments that the planters put the enslaved people through. And so it was terrible, 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 terrible. And so causes impact of the French Revolution, the desire for freedom, Black numerical superiority, African-born enslaved. Most of them were African-born, and the harsh treatment by the harsh treatments that the enslaved people went through during slavery. And so they wanted to free themselves from those harsh treatments. And then we have to look at the role of their religion. One thing that unites them together was their religion, which was voodoo. And so they made an oath to their ancestral spirits that their ancestral spirits need to help them to overcome the whites. And so religion was one thing that they used to bind them together. Then we have to look at leaders like Bookman and Toussaint Louverture and John Dessalines and Henry Christophe. These are all excellent leaders. And you need to know each of these leaders and their contribution to the Haitian Revolution. Go ahead for me, Brown.
Sir, would Macandal be on there as well?
Yes, we could also use Macandal as a leader. Yes. All right. So just to close, Toussaint, let us look at some of the things that Toussaint did. So one, he would have raised an army. So he started an army with the enslaved people. Right? Louverture. The French government is going to abolish slavery. He supports the French government. So in France, they abolished slavery, but in the colony, they said that slavery should remain. And he's going to get ammunition from the Spanish and the British. He's going to teach them about guerrilla tactics, plan the revolt. So he played a very key role in the Haitian Revolution. Some of the things that he's going to do. But Toussaint was invited to a conference and he was arrested and he died in prison in France in 1803. They killed him. And then after him, then you're going to have Dessalines, who is going to declare Haiti independence. He's going to continue, but both of them work together. Both Dessalines and Toussaint work together. Right? And so what we're going to see here, what is taking place here, ladies, is that a lot of different events happen that led to the end of slavery in Saint-Domingue. All right, ladies.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to post the PowerPoint in the classroom. Read the text. Read the book that I sent you. Please, may I beg you now. Read the book. Make the notes in your notebook. Answer the questions. Please. Please. On this. Tomorrow when we meet, I'm going to show you a video on the Haitian Revolution. All right, ladies? Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you, sir, and same to you. Bye, sir.
Bye-bye.